So, gentlemen, a very warm welcome from my side. I'm very happy to have you here. Let's talk immediately about everything that is right now. I think a lot of us, we have to handle, and I think we are thinking about it. People seem to be disturbed. There's turmoil in the world. And I would like to start by the events that happened last weekend here in Germany. We've seen almost 1 million people taking to the streets to protest far-right extremism, far-right parties. What is your take on that? What are your thoughts on that, Alex?
Well, I mean, actually, maybe we should let Matthias go first since I'm not living here. But I guess I have the advantage of being somewhat of an outsider. But the disadvantage. Across the West, we have rising, successful right-wing movements, and they're much more successful than people would have thought. And I think and I spent a lot of my life and my products finding ways to weaken these movements by adding real value. I think the mistake, so I'm very in support of protesting against the far right. I think it would be a brand and societal disaster for Europe if all of Europe was run by the far right. One of the things, since we're in Germany, that I really treasure about the German education was that you always went as deep to the root cause as possible. And I think one of the things that we who are progressive or enlightened have messed up both in America and in Europe is we need to simultaneously attack the far right and also accept that some of the things that they're saying need to be addressed as real issues. If you call having a border racism, and you cannot talk about the immigration concerns in Germany, if every single statistic has to be reread so that it cannot be negative in a way that is not conformant with the way we at the universities are taught to think, you are just empowering the far right. So I believe you have to simultaneously fight the far right, but then say, we're going to make the society healthier, wealthier, fairer, and more honest. So in America, I've been a large supporter of Democrats. I've been telling Democrats for years, if we do not fix the border, we will lose every election. And Denmark is an exception in Europe where they went to the left, took over the party of some of the principles of the right, have done it more gently, and is very successfully run. We have to accept that sometimes the right is right about some issues, not in the way they're framing it. So to successfully stop right-wing movements, which are indisputably winning. But if the election were tomorrow in America, Trump would win, and not by a little. So that's basically, you have to fix the problems, you have to take responsibility for fixing the problems. That means the society has to work better. And you have to get rid of this inability to accept that some issues are legitimate just because they're unpleasant.
Well, I agree. I think it is a shame on the one hand that more than a fifth of the German population is in favor of a party like the AfD, which definitely is not a part of a solution, is a party of resentment. That this party is even the strongest political power in 3 states in Germany. It's a shame, yes, but it's also a symptom. It's a symptom that topics that people really care about are not taken seriously by the leading parties, and that people are disappointed by dysfunctional elements of the present government. And here, 3 topics are most important. One is a totally failed migration policy, which leads to the opposite of what the advocates of a very tolerant, embracing migration policy want to achieve. That is open-mindedness and pluralism and multicultural lifestyle. The opposite is going to happen: racism, xenophobia. So people have a high level of discomfort with that policy. The second one is climate policy, which is overdone and very ideological and damaging to wealth and prosperity of democracies, and particularly here in Germany, to the disadvantage of the not so privileged parts of the German population. And the third topic is very much in general, prosperity, wealth, growth, a lack of personal individual prosperity. People are unhappy with that. And so voting for the AfD does not mean that a fifth of the German population is influenced or even driven by Nazi ideology. I don't believe that. It is more a gesture of protest, and I would strongly recommend that political elites take the topic seriously and the discomfort of the population seriously, try to come up with answers, and then with that diminish the role of extremist parties on the very right and on the very left. If we just blame the voters for being so stupid, that's not going to solve the problem.
Just as an addendum, on October 7th, I spent a lot of my life in Germany. I went to school here, lots of friends. For the last 5 years, been very, very frustrated by almost everything that's happened in Germany. It's hard to understand the immigration policy. It's hard to understand the energy policy. In America, while we've been too politically correct, most Americans who are saying these things don't even believe them, and that has some advantages. Whereas in Germany, people actually believe some of this stuff, and then you can't really compromise. But I think, to Matthias's point, but then Germany is also somehow has this enormous integrity, which you see in issues around anti-Semitism, that it's really important that we get, those of us who care about Germany, get Germany to work. It is the motor of Europe. It is the second most important economy in the West by far. It has been the home of almost, not all philosophical movements that are relevant, but many, almost all developments in metallics, the birthplace of theoretical physics, the birthplace of people who built most of the people who built the bomb, which may not be popular in Germany, but was really important for fighting fascism. It is the birthplace of certain kinds of ethical frameworks. And I believe that's the reason why Germany has had so much integrity on the issue of anti-Semitism and Israel compared to any other country besides America. It's really a shining star. The two issues that I think for me are decisive are, why doesn't Germany have a tech scene that is comparable to America's? Because we forget this, but before the war, Germany had the tech scene in every area. Like before the war, it wouldn't be uncommon to speak German. If you were a physicist, you learned German. If you were in literature, you learned German. If you were in films, you learned German. So there's a real issue there. And the second issue is, how do you get the German public to believe that there's a GDP story, which I think no one believes. Like, in America, we have the problem that we wonder that all the GDP will fall to people like me.
But Alex, let me get back to anti-Semitism. You said rightly that the German government is very clear about anti-Semitism, and there's no question, almost across all political parties, there is this consensus, it should never happen again, and so on. Nevertheless, if we take some concrete facts, we should not be too complacent about it. I mean, the news of yesterday that the Berlin government withdrew a decision that if you want to take state money for cultural projects as an artist, you have to basically sign an anti-Semitism clause that you are not supportive of anti-Semitism. Why was that withdrawn? I just cannot believe it. I mean, there was a wave of opposition against that clause, which is, I mean, not something very unusual, I would say. It should be a given in Germany. It should be a natural instinct that you are, particularly as an artist, as an intellectual, as a sensitive person, that you are against anti-Semitism. But suddenly there was a counter wave of opposition, and artists said, no, we cannot sign that. That's a limitation of freedom of expression. I mean, how do we define freedom of expression? That we want to be able to advocate racism and anti-Semitism in Germany again? I don't think so. And I thought that a government like in Berlin should also stay firm if there is some opposition in the cultural scene. But they didn't. They withdrew it. I find it pretty scandalous. And I think we cannot allow ourselves the smallest degree of complacency in that context. It's great that there are millions on the street against the far right. But I would also feel a little happier if there are also millions on the street against anti-Semitism.
Well,
and I don't see that.
Of course, things could be better, and I'm very proud that we are friends and that you're helping to make things better in Germany. I do think, from an outside perspective, though, Germany and America are the shining star here. And we should make our shining star even brighter.
The question is, to whom do you compare? That's right.
I think there is a potential alliance that between America and Germany on lots of issues. The fascinating thing about anti-Semitism in general is that it basically is a metaphor for, you know, the famous Disraeli quote, God doeth unto nations as nations doeth unto Jews. Look, you show me rates of anti-Semitism, I'll show you the health of your culture. And it's very hard. When I used to be a social scientist of kinds, and it's actually very hard to measure the trajectory of a culture 10, 15, 20 years out. You could do it based on wealth, but it's hard to measure wealth. Wealthy people tend to discount their wealth. But you can do it on this. And to this point, yes, Germany could be better. But I would say the business elite of Germany, the ones I know, are pretty unified that Germany cannot afford anti-Semitism.
I totally agree. I'm really proud of that. There was this initiative of German business leaders when they did this advertising campaign, Never Ever Again is Now. That was the headline of that campaign, where they basically said, let's not talk only about history should never repeat, let anti-Semitism never happen again. They said, this is happening now and we have to stand up against it. So there was a very clear sign. You are right, Germany may be better than other countries. I'm also worried that anti-Semitism seems to become almost a generational phenomenon. And this is definitely not a European or a German speciality. In America, I was shocked by two surveys, by two polls, one of the Harvard University, where 51% of the Americans under 24 said that they think the attack of Hamas was justified. Can you imagine? They did not say, we are supportive of Palestinians or their human rights. No, they said the attacks of Hamas were justified. And the second poll of The Economist asked also Americans of different age cohorts, and the younger ones, Americans below 30, 20% of them said they think the Holocaust was a myth. Where are we? That a fifth of the American population, the biggest democracy in the world, thinks that the Holocaust is basically an invention, a myth. Unbelievable. And I think we have to deal with that. We have to discuss the role of social media, what TikTok does in that context as the most powerful propaganda instrument. I think it really develops a level of danger that can undermine democracies. And you are absolutely right, Alex. It is not about anti-Semitism for altruistic reasons only. It is about us. It is about our lifestyle. It's about freedom. It's about freedom of expression. And it's about diversity and a lifestyle that we all enjoy. And that is under attack these days.
You're both very outspoken. You're both in a position where you can allow yourself to be very outspoken. When you look around fellow CEOs, not only on the national grounds here in Germany, like internationally, what do you see? Are you happy with the conversations you are having right now when it comes to these topics, anti-Semitism, the state of the world?
I think CEOs are definitely doing much better these days than the cultural elites. I'm totally disappointed by the artists who have always been so close to my heart, because I was counting on their human instincts. And this seems to be lost these days in large parts of the cultural community. That is my bigger worry than the business elites.
Alex?
I do think there's a difference between German and American business elites, and some of it is just structural. American, the economic, to give, obviously, everyone knows what side I'm on, but let me just steel man the other side. So, the problem that the elite of the elite of the elite in America has is they're doing very, very, very well. And they believe correctly they're going to do even better tomorrow. And so, therefore, only weighing in on ideologies they don't believe in, but make them look good, but that gives them a pass so that no one asks them about the fact that nearly all the GDP growth in the world's most powerful country in the world is going to fall into their hands, is super useful. And so there's a reason why the business elite, particularly in Silicon Valley, gloms onto ideologies that they know make no sense, but allow them to productize the user and then simultaneously give them a path towards monetization where they're morally free. And that's why you hear lots of people speaking out on issues that they clearly do not believe in, and silence on issues that they do probably believe in. The German situation is a little different, steel manning it, because German business leaders are not super optimistic about their future. I think that's kind of obvious. And I would say, interestingly, are more courageous than often cultural leaders here, which is surprising. It wasn't that way when I lived in Germany, with notable exceptions. But obviously, I believe that this is a societal problem. I also believe it's going to get much, much worse, because just one note on the stats you gave, it's really upsetting the level of ignorance among the youth, but it's also the case that if you disambiguated this into people who are going to do well in this economy, I think you would find very different stats. If you took people who are quantitative, very high performing, I think their views are likely to be very similar to ours. And that's going to be a huge problem in America, because you're going to have a swath of people making all the money who are more rational on these issues, and the people who are studying humanities and are not likely to do as well in general. I studied humanities, you studied humanities, we've done very well. So I think there's just this, it's like that. And what worries me about America is that, for example, the venture community that I've largely viewed as evil my whole life, I'm now very aligned with. And why am I aligned with them? Because they believe in outperformance. If you believe in outperformance, you are very likely to want to measure things exactly. You're very, very likely, but not always likely, to say, I accept that some people will do better. You're very likely to be very resistant to anti-Semitism and all of these regressive ideologies. I'm
very much in line with your analysis of this widening gap between those who enjoy fast-growing wealth and those who are left behind. But in a way, to inject a slightly more optimistic note on that topic, I think what we are currently experiencing globally may be a very healthy wake-up call for business leaders, and with that, for democracy as a whole. I mean, democracy is under attack, that's very clear. Democracy is under attack by anti-Semitism, democracy is under attack in Ukraine from Russia, democracy is under attack in Israel by Hamas and other terrorist forces, democracy is under attack by China, which is among the mentioned the most dangerous one and the biggest one and the most powerful one. So democracy is under attack. And business leaders tend to think, in this kind of spirit of Milton Friedman's famous saying, the purpose of business is business, that they don't have to deal with politics as long as they can do their business alone. And that is over. It has been proven that business has never been so political as these days. Everything that a business leader decides has a political impact. Energy dependency on Russian gas, business decision, high political impact. Subsidizing and funding and doing business with countries who are basically funding terrorists in order to destroy Israel, highly political, China, and so on. So in a way, I think that what we are experiencing these days is a wake-up call where more and more business leaders understand that if we want to keep the ecosystem in which we operate, democracy, freedom, free market economy, we have to make decisions.
But just two caveats, since it's always good to kind of spar with people you largely agree with. I think democracy is also under attack because our elites have been telling lies and half-lies about things. Because the institutions very much underperform, every institution, and certainly, and because people have figured out that they're getting not very much from their society, and therefore are trying to find anything that could work where people at least talk about some of the hard issues. The second point I would say is the problem for the American business leader is not that they haven't been political. It's that they're only political when it's easy. I think this is I do think this is different in Germany, where in Germany, the real thing is business leaders are, please leave me alone to make money. Actually, I'm very sympathetic. It's not my position. It's not yours. I don't want it to be but I'm sympathetic with that position. If your position has been, please leave me alone, I want to make money, I'll work with anyone. But the average business leader in America, you know them better than I do in many ways. It's been, let me talk about frogs being annihilated in the Amazon. Let me talk about the color blue being bigotry. And all of a sudden you have this societal issue of our generation and it's complete silence. But on the first issue, I think we could eradicate extremes on the left and on the right by simply saying, we are going to raise the standard of living for everyone in our country. And this is how we're going to do it. We are going to have borders. We are going to be honest about what it means to have who we want, who we don't want. We are going to piss off both sides. And I think if we did that and delivered, in my view, we also in America need to spend much more on software in the military to scare our adversaries. There we're very aligned. That actually could work.
Gentlemen, I would like to draw a bit more of attention to the situation in Israel. All three of us here at this table have been there. I was sent there by my boss for coverage. You visited with the whole board of your company. We've been, I think, to the same attacked kibbutz, the Kfar Aza. You've been there. You met the highest-ranking politicians there. Please share your impressions of Israeli society coping with the aftermath of these attacks.
I have a very short one, and that was when I was sitting in the plane to fly back. A friend asked me, how was it in Israel? And I wrote back to him and said, I think I'm going to emigrate to Israel, because if Israel is at war, the sentiment and the spirit is still more uplifting than in Germany at peace. So I was totally surprised how across all political parties and opinions, how in a way positive, of course, also to a certain degree self-confident. The spirit was in the idea of, we gotta win this war in order to defend the right of existence of this country, in order to defend our lifestyle, but we do it with the instruments of democracy, and we do not basically fall into the trap of copying the methods of our enemies. And I think that is the most important thing in order to keep the credibility of Israel as an imperfect democracy where the rule of law still applies.
Mm-hmm. Very similar impressions. I think, look, there's nothing good about October 7th, but I do think the obvious, if you're going to hold Israel, it's a question of, should it be a double standard, a quadruple standard, 10x the standard? Like, the reaction of anti-Israel protesters and organizations and countries bringing absurd claims is so extreme that both inside and outside Israel, I think if you're going to hold Israel to a standard that's twice as high, people will be like, okay. But it's now like, there is no other world power that, including what I view as almost the holy country of America, that would react any other way but worse to these situations. That's just a baseline fact. Like, if this happened to Russia, China, I don't know what happened. I have a rough sense of what would happen to America, and we're a deeply humane, deeply fair, I think America's been a beacon of light to the world with some notable flaws. So you're holding them to, but this has had a unification effect, not just inside, but outside of Israel. I also think it's becoming increasingly clear, again, I would look, I think the fact that the venture community in California, which is I would call the dominant business community in the world, most important business, and again, I say this as somebody who literally, I ran into a prominent member of it, and I said, on October 6th, you were the Death Star and Lord Vader. And now it's like, but it's like they are a metaphor for, we, under the worst situation, we are going to do innovative things. We're going to raise our standard. We are not going to comply to, because the logical reaction to being held by a completely different standard, the logical reaction would be like, screw it. Why should we have a standard at all? That's honestly the way every other country in the world would react to this. It's like,
they don't.
They don't. Yeah. And so it's like, and you're deceiving yourself if you don't think every other country in the world would react like that. And the reason why people deceive themselves is it is actually a massive bug for most people who hate Israel, that they don't. It's like they hold themselves to a higher standard. The military is held to a higher standard. The standard being what would any other country would do, not what somebody at a foundation that's never done anything in the world. By the way, a foundation whose policies have never run an institution that's ever worked. So if you have to judge them by the society has gone from being a desert to, they have 60% GDP growth over the last 30 years. France has 30%. And this is basically in one section of Israel. So they have the second best tech scene in the world. So it's like, and that really pisses people off. But I think it would be better for the world just to agree, we're going to have a 2x standard. But we're actually going to enforce the 2x standard. Yes, of course, it's not going to be 1x. But I do think the thing I told Israelis, and the thing that I've seen start to happen is, there are a lot of people, again, the most functional parts of the world, again, places I've not been aligned with are like, yes, but we need societies and institutions to work, not work in the theory of some academic playbook run by people who've literally destroyed everything they've touched, but by people who've done things that are very hard under the harshest conditions. And so that's what I thought.
Alex, Matthias, I would like to draw attention to the one big issue that is, I think, is going to run and shape the world in a way we haven't seen anything like it. It's AI. So in preparation of this interview, I asked the ChatGPT-4, especially when it comes to the Mideast, this conflict hasn't been solved by human brains. I was just wondering what ChatGPT-4 would answer when I asked them, okay, how to solve the Mideast problem. I was a bit disappointed because the answers I got, it's literally everything that's already been tried on to solve this problem. So maybe I'm not using it right, the ChatGPT-4. Alex, what would be the right way to use it?
Look, let me just give you, since people talk about this, let me tell you something that people don't say that's true. The only real material uses of AI that have worked, the first were in the military. And what we learned in building those systems was, it's very Germanic actually. It's the processing of the algorithm, the processing of the large language model where all the value is. And currently, most of these things, at least in America, that's kind of head start in industry, a lot of people are realizing this is a little bit like self-pleasuring. But if you want to take it from self-pleasuring to useful on the battlefield or useful in industry, you've got to take what they say and process it against your internal knowledge system and reach a conclusion and then impose that conclusion on your enterprise. And this is what happens on the battlefield. And this is the one thing, though, for the European audience that I would like to say is, yes, this looks like self-pleasuring and useless, but done correctly, this allows America to leapfrog your industry. Like we are powering people that are manufacturing in America as if they were German, with American workers, as if they were Japanese. So like Europe has to take seriously that America is producing almost all the AI companies, and implemented correctly on the battlefield, or taking these things that are largely, for example, if you took this, asked an expert's opinion, went to a secret database, ran it against the secret database, you would get real answers that are useful in your society and on the battlefield. Without the processing of it, it's useless. And that actually is tricking part of Europe to think, okay, we can do what we've done in the past. And that's dangerous.
Perhaps two remarks to your example. First of all, it shows that the algorithm is not neutral. That's what people would like to think, but it is, of course, biased, and it reflects the bias of the people who started to program it. So there is always human brain behind artificial intelligence, and that's why this idea, this is now helping us to be completely neutral and unbiased, is misleading. The second remark is, we should not take some comfort out of the observation that some of the answers of large language models are not totally sophisticated and convincing. I think altogether, AI and large language models are a game changer, as you have said, a very fundamental game changer. I think it may have a bigger impact on society and how we do business, how we do politics, than the invention of the internet and the first 2 decades of digitization. And I think we definitely should embrace it and should be aware of the fact that the self-learning mechanisms of artificial intelligence are accelerating progress and the quality of the product. And that's why we should not try to define limits. So this is what AI cannot do. There is no emotion. There is no sense of humor. Yes, there is. AI can be very funny and can fake emotions way better than a lot of human beings. So be careful about defining the limits. Don't define the limits, embrace it.
Don't you see moral or ethical limits?
Yeah, but we should not start with a moral discussion. We should first try to understand it, embrace it, and then with some ethical limitations, make sure that the machines serve the human beings and not the other way around. That's the decisive
So again, I kind of think there's, in America and Europe are just in very different places here. In Europe, my worry is that the anemic tech scene is going to stay even more anemic because of regulation and just a general view that I think many people in European business have in leadership, that this is some weird joke. And that is crazy dangerous for the West because, like, again, GDP in America is going to grow, maybe not evenly or in state to state. And so that scares me. In America, the main issue is, are we going to use these things in the defense context? Are we implementing these things in the defense contracts? Are we spending enough in the defense contract?
But here I would be curious to hear your view how governance of AI is going to work out if we have a new arms race of AI progress between America as the leading power of democratic AI and China as the leading power of totalitarian AI. 1.4 billion people, amount of data that is uncomparable, and almost no ethical limits. Everything is supported that serves the well-being of the central state and the Communist Party. How is that going to play out? And is there a chance that we, democracies, are going to win that arms race?
Well, there are two arms races. There's the domestic arms race and the peer-to-peer arms race. I hope we lose the domestic arms race. Like, how do you control your population? So I do think authoritarian countries, it's going to be even harder to change them because I don't know how you organize a counter movement when surveillance can be this sophisticated. I really am in favor, people think this is surprising, of limiting those kind of technologies used on the domestic population all over the West. Then you have the peer-to-peer, and it's kind of not surprising, but my view is you win the arms race by scaring the adversary. I think one of the biggest areas of instability right now is there's a perception that of rough equality between China and America. If you want to make the world a more peaceful place, America has to have the vastly superior position. And America can do this. The primary barrier to this is something I'm working on day and night, which is getting the U.S. Congress to fund AI-enhanced weapon systems at a rate that's not minuscule, and making sure that the things that are funded actually work. So software that's worked on the battlefield, so in Israel, Ukraine. But again, in broad strokes, let us hope we lose the internal surveillance race because, like, there is no room for privacy. You could literally take away everyone's minuscule privacy. Honestly, with these kind of tools, you could take away someone's internal privacy because you will know better what they're going to do than what they think they're going to do.
Alex, is this what you were thinking about when you said in an interview with Bloomberg colleagues a couple of weeks ago, and I cite you here, we are offering things, your company, that are so powerful that in reality, I'm not even sure we should sell that to some of our clients?
Well, I don't think we should use these things domestically. And if I believed our adversaries were benevolent, yeah, I would not be in favor of developing these technologies. But I actually think our adversaries will be benevolent when our stick is stronger, longer, better, more precise. And you'll see how peaceful they are. And that's, like, one of the problems we have in the West broadly is it's very hard for our intellectual class to say the simple truth, which is the world will be better if America is stronger than its adversaries. Just that simple truth. But our artistic class in Germany, our academic class in America, their whole life is dedicated to pretending that's not true.
I would like to add the world will be a better place if America and Europe are strong and are strong 100%. Together.
Yeah,
I'm not so sure if that's going to happen. I mean,
well, I agree with you on that. Like, if America and Germany and France could have a real alliance, and
it would be powerful.
It would be very powerful. And the silver lining, it's like Europe has a GDP issue. And I don't believe that it can solve that issue without massive transfers of technology. And like, if Europe wants to stop the AfD and Le Pen, you have to be more honest about certain issues that are unpleasant, and you have to solve the GDP issue. If you do not solve those two things, you might as well just accept that they're going to win every election at some point in the future. Maybe it won't be today, but it will be tomorrow. And that's where there could be a massive alliance between, and an alliance would mean, you know, in my business, one of the reasons software is the best business ever is both sides make more. Because I spend $1 billion building the product, I sell it to you for $8 million, $9 million. So you're happy because you couldn't build it, and if you could, it would take $2 billion, $3 billion. You can't build it anyway. I'm happy because I can keep selling it. And that's the kind of an economic alliance. Like, for example, on the military side, there are things that we've built that you could build on top of, around doesn't have to all be Palantir. But like, there should be some way where you could transfer this, and then the local industry could build next to it, above it, below it. And that's a situation where all sides are happy. And you see the same thing in large language models. But to your point, you need a strong West.
Matthias, when we look at our industry, journalism, how will AI shape it, let's say, in the next 5 years? Will I be sitting here in 5 years still?
Well, that depends on. If you think that you can continue the workflows that you used to do over the last years and decades, no. If you really are curious and use the opportunities that large language models and AI provide in order to get a better journalist, then you can focus and allocate much more of your time on what you are doing anyway, and that is investigate news. Try to find out something new, observe something out there that other people and even the algorithm doesn't see. That is the kind of essential quality of great journalism. And with the help of AI, we can do much better. I'm really optimistic. I mean, of course, large language models, the new answer machines, have the potential to eradicate journalism as we know it. And then we will be all out of business. But I think the opportunity is way bigger, that it helps us to get rid of all the boring stuff of our workflows, focus on the exciting stuff, and with that make journalism better, more relevant, and more authentic, and with that more impactful in society. I truly think the opportunity is there. So let's not develop that kind of cultural pessimism and say AI is killing jobs and so on. Yes, it is, but it is also going to create new jobs. And for journalism, I definitely think it is much more of an opportunity than a threat.
Gentlemen, last question for this round. There is, as I said in the very beginning of this interview talk, a lot of turmoil going on in the whole world. What is it that gives you hope when you look at it? Do you see somewhere, I don't know, a little bit of sunshine, a little bit of hope that things could develop into a more peaceful, into a better future?
Common sense. People are smarter than some of the journalistic and political elites think. And I believe in common sense and in the kind of self-correcting mechanisms of the open society model.
GDP growth in America is going to really outperform. And if we can keep our country remotely sane politically, that leaves a bridge to build a Western alliance. And then you could have a very different world. And actually, to the earlier point, I think that the basically adversaries to the West and what I would call everything good have so overshot the mark. They have just no credibility. The arguments are not sustainable. And by the way, this is not just something that like people in the West understand. Everyone understands it.
The old sentence that every crisis bears an opportunity is absolutely true. We are in a very bad situation. As we said, democracy is under attack. But I truly think that that can be a wake-up call, that people now realize we have to fight for it, we have to defend it. And that is true for business leaders, that is true for political leaders, that is true for the society as a whole. And concretely in that context, maybe it is also the moment for a new establishment of a transatlantic alliance of values as a basis to invite other democracies and open societies around the world to stick together, to join forces, because that's the new world order question. Is democracy the model of the future, or are authoritarian systems are gaining power and are undermining democracy? That's the big question. And I want to remain optimistic, and I'm truly optimistic that this crisis may have a healthy impact, and that in 10 years from now we will say, okay, it was good that it went so bad, because from then on there was a recovery of transatlantic alliance and of an alliance of democracies.
So I see you again in 10 years' time, Dr. Matthias Döpfner, Dr. Alex Karp. Thank you so much for having been here.
Thank you.
Danke.